First and foremost, to be a really resilient person, which may seem counter to a lot of things you've heard, is you really need to validate the struggle first. And and when I worked for the military, they used to say, embrace the suck, and which I always thought was cute. But in other words, what you're really saying is you have to acknowledge that something's really difficult in order to do something about it. If I don't even let myself admit that I'm struggling or that something's really hard for me, I'm going to do nothing to take care of myself. So first and foremost, we have to do that. You also want to use your own unique skills and your own ability to cope. All of us cope and differently than any other person. So we have to sort of crack the code of what really works for us versus we might look around and notice that other people, wow, they're doing really good, and I try on what they're doing and it doesn't help at all. And then I'm confused thinking, what's wrong with me? Nothing. It's just not your way of coping. It just doesn't fit you well. You also definitely want to increase your support system. Probably of anything that can help us be more resilient is to have people in our life that we feel safe enough with, that we can talk to them, that we get understanding from them, that we get empathy from them, we get the support we need from them. Keeping it all to ourselves is usually equated with some poor outcomes as far as research goes, and so we definitely want to have those people we can tap into. And then also I think another thing that's important is we do want to always take strategic breaks, and that's even during our workday. That's also making sure that we get a good break on the weekend, that we don't work like crazy during the week and then turn around and work all weekend doing, all of the things. We want to do some fun things or some entertaining things, or just having time to ourselves sometimes is important. And then obviously, for the big ones like vacations. So those can be, but we want to make sure we're integrating those regularly and not expecting ourselves to be a machine doing, just grinding away all the time. We need to acknowledge our humanness. Because there's so much strength in first responder workers, they will sometimes absorb way more perhaps than they ought to. So adjusting to challenges is a really great skill, but this also has a dark side too, because I can keep adjusting and adjusting and adjusting to the point where I am not myself anymore. I'm making decisions in order to cope that really aren't in my best interest. So again, that individual choice that we make to adjust, things like, wow, look at me, I did really well, I adjusted. But then we don't look at the big pile of adjustments we've made, and before we know it, our quality of life has declined because we aren't paying attention to the bigger picture. And again, that's another one of those death by a thousand cuts. We don't realize it. And for all of us, truthfully, is we want to recognize when I ought to take a step back and then I may need to actually change something significant in my life because I am being forced to adjust too frequently in ways that are not self-affirming. Another thing that's really important with resilience, and especially too for not adjusting too much, is that all of us need to know our stress range. And I always tell people, first responders have a tendency to have a very robust stress range, which is just kind of a dilemma in of itself, but that's another conversation. But all of us are optimized in the middle. It's really interesting. We all do the best work. We all perform most brilliantly in the middle. And so with normal stressors, we call them acute stressors, we would do this. So I would have this stressful thing happen, I bump up to the top of my stress range, I take care of it, and then I go right back to the middle. And that's a normal functioning way for a person to be dealing with. But if I'm a person who is under what's called chronic stress, or I'm making those little resilient shifts all of the time, I'm moving up the range, and before you know it, I'm actually very close to the top of my range instead of realizing I need to be in the middle. I need to find processes that will allow me to operate most of my life in the middle range, not on the top end of my range. And so, obviously one of the most important things is you have to prioritize self-care. You have to make sure you're doing things like getting really, really good sleep, eating healthy food, making sure you get some movement in on a regular basis. These will all make you more stress resilient. And then our overall strategies for stress management are also part of that. I always call it four-legged stool. You want all four legs to be really, really, really strong. And especially from the standpoint of recognizing when you are taking on too much stress and then making some important decisions to get that to come down. And then I think overall, we have to be the first ones to notice, hopefully, that we're not functioning well and that we're going to immediately respond with self-care. But I think it's also important to sometimes rope someone else or a couple other people into that mix and let them know, like, this is what I look like when I'm doing really, really well, and I want you to notice this, this, and this. Because that way they can say, like, oh, you know, I've noticed you're not doing those things anymore. I'm noticing this about you. And that way you give them permission to give you that feedback so that you can end up taking that really good inventory of your own functioning and get it to shift again.